スオーバーできんのかな。
New Visions for Regenerative Urbanism Symposium is the session we're having. Welcome to the symposium. We have two parallel symposiums. So this is one of the symposium. We call it Bigtable. That's before we start this symposium program, ArcDR3, if I may, I'd like to take a moment to explain this initiative, ArcDR3. Well, this initiative, UCLA and Tohoku University and the Mirai Kanan actually have been the lead players actually connecting the 11 universities of the Association of the Pacific Rim Universities. So this is part of the international platform. So again, on it is actually the Pan-Pacific region. Actually, the Pan-Pacific region actually is faced with the common issues, including disasters. How best we can actually fix this issue, how we can actually make those communities stronger vis-a-vis disasters. It started back in 2011. Actually, due to the COVID-19, actually, we need to actually have the dialogue communication through the online systems. Again, we're so happy to give this opportunity with many scholars as well as students. And now we're having this exhibition. Regenerative Urbanism. So this is actually the title of the exhibition. Actually, we are having the grand opening day of this exhibition today. And it is being held Nihonbashi, Mitsumoromachi, and actually this exhibition is going to be held up until April 24th. I do hope that you find your time and to come and join us, and I hope that we can impress you. That's it. In this exhibition, by the way, again, 11 universities actually behind this, and actually 7 the imaginary the cities and art stories. That's what you see in this exhibition. So how we can co-live with the nature. This is going to be the theme given to us. How cities should be coping with the possible disasters. Again, we are having all these stories and 7 city stories. How we should be living with, coping with these disaster issues, and what are the important initiatives, ideas we need to keep in mind going forward into the future years. Now, if I may, I'd like to take a moment to explain this the Bigtable the program. Actually, this consists of 2 sessions. In the small table, by the way, actually, this small table discussion is going on in parallel. This is, of course, an ARC DR3, and all these 11 universities and scholars and teachers and actually are responsible for the small sessions and actually consist of the 3 the teachers. In this big table, actually, we are going to have on honor to have the 4 excellent speakers. Be it the architecture or be it the journalism. So they have their expertise on the domain. So we have invited these 4 the experts, and they are going to actually have the presentation as well as discussion. So this discussion and the presentation have 2 parts in a section. Each presentation is going to be 50 minutes, and discussion is going to be 50 minutes. Then we're going to have the 15-minute break. Then we'll move into the second session. Before we move into the discussion, if I may, I'd like to take a moment to explain what we mean by this regenerative urbanism in order to help the general public in this regard. Regenerative urbanism. Yes. Again, this is the international workshop we are having under the sponsorship of the ARC-DR3. Actually, going through this program, we wanted to have all the people connected so that we can be actually we can be given the good opportunity to create what we call the common platform. Regenerative. What is regenerative in Japanese? Of course, again, it is going to be regeneration, and also urbanism is the theory and studies on the urban issues and problems. We came to the conclusion that instead of having this translated into Japanese, because if we actually translate this into Japanese, that may actually result in some the misunderstanding. Again, the methodologies and to design major cities. Again, that is urbanism. But again, we are now looking at not the regular cities. Well, the cities or the communities and the villages and the towns, or again, natural environments. And you find it in if you go into the rural areas, or there could be no person living in these areas. Anyway, so we are trying to look at all these possible situations. Again, we would like to actually look at all these possible situations again in the terminology of urbanism. So this urbanism should cover not only something hard or something social or the engineering. So we would like to actually begin good opportunities to leverage all these different the fields. Regenerative. What is this regenerative meaning? Actually, you may have your strong association. Well, we may be talking about something the broken needs to be rebuilt. Again, we are not talking about bit more on the dynamism actually, and how best we can actually rebuild the relationship between the humans and the environment, natural environment. So regenerative urbanism, of course, the humans and also the natural environment, how these 2 things actually can co-live with each other. So this is going to be the basic idea behind this the English terminology, the regenerative and urbanism. We're so happy and given this an opportunity and having this symposium. Again, through these activities, through this the program, actually we would like to share the basic ideas. Again, this is going to be just one of the many possible ideas behind the regenerative urbanism. I do hope that we can actually give you some the baseline for your further thoughts. If I may, I'd like to introduce today's the speakers. Can you see the slide? The very first presenter is going to be Junko Edahiro. Junko Edahiro, actually, her bio is written here in English. Again, Institute of Studies and Happiness, Economy and Society in ISHES. So she does represent this in ISHES. And also, she is a professor of the leadership and innovation, and professor at the Graduate School of Leadership and Innovation at the Shizenkan University. So, of course, she is teaching at this academic the organizations. Let me introduce next the Mariana Ibanez. She is with UCLA, and actually she is associate and a professor of the architecture and urban design department at the University of California, Los Angeles. And also, she leads the Department of the Architecture department. Also, she has her own she has co-founded Ibanez the Kim. So she is the expert in this the general in architecture. I do understand that Adairo-san is going to actually speak in Japanese, and Ibanez is going to be, of course, speaking in English, and discussion will be carried out in English. Let me explain in the second session. Let me first introduce Mr. Matsushima. Mr. Matsushima, by the way, he is the head of the editorial content of Wired Japan. As you see, actually, he's been deeply engaged in Wired-related projects. I'm sure that he's one of the excellent leaders behind Wired and activities. Let me move on to the next speaker. Let me introduce Mr. Tachikawa. He represents the designer. This is a well-known design office, and also JIDA president. He is serving as the JIDA president. Also, he is also the professor at the Keio University Business School, HDM, and basic concept creator for the 2025 Osaka Kansai Expo Japan Pavilion. Yes, he's serving as the concept creator there. Well, without further ado, let us now begin the very first session. Again, presentation by Edahiro-san, and also following that, Mariana-san is going to make her presentation.
Without further ado, let's ask Junko Edahiro to present. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Well, I would like to provide some part of my presentation at the beginning. And a very important, significant, and very advanced opportunity of this event itself. I'm very much happy to take part of it. And I hope I will be able to contribute, at the same time learn through this experience. So again, thank you for the introduction. This is Shizenkan University, a graduate school, leadership and innovation, also located in the same venue in Nihonbashi area. And I would like to dive into my content, but it goes without saying that in terms of the time that we live, the era that we live, is now in the midst of large transformation. Change after change is said to be volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It is the time of VUCA. So in this time and era that we live in, how should we live? Each one of us as an individual, without any difference in disciplines and areas. So we need to consider how we lead our lives. Professor Abe talked about living with disasters. So in Atami area, I live in Atami area, and I'm participating from Atapi. That is, as you may know, and those people in Japan, in the 3rd of July last year, there was a big landslide, and 26 people have lost their life, and 1 people are still yet to be found due to this landslide. And I have been, right after this disaster, trying to extend my help. So really, what is the notion of living with disasters? This is something that is always on my mind. And whenever what may happen to us, we never know. And the power and capability that we need in this time is the power of resilience. Well, resilience in Japanese is power to recover, to reboot, elasticity. There are many ways how you can translate and interpret resilience in Japanese. But we call it resilience in Japanese as well, because this is the physics, a world from physics. Let's say there's a spring, and when you press the spring, where you release your fingers, the springs jumps up. So this jumping up sort of power or kinetics is what you call resilience. So in other words, not to be able to be crushed by the external power. When the external powers are released, you have the power to re-stand and reboot and respring once again. So in Japanese, I talked about the strength with tenacity is the word that I use. So in the natural disaster or the world somewhere, a conflict or war or crude oil or energy, whether or not there is a dispute amongst them within that. And in Japan, we have the problem of dropping birth rate and the demographic changing. And these are unavoidable. So how will we be able to stand against these changes and have resilience? So that is a significant meaning of resilience. So I myself believe this is so important. And then asking myself what resilience is, and that led to me in writing this book about what is resilience. So in terms of the research, there are a lot of research conducted around resilience. So we say we have parents, mother and father, and one is ecological resilience. The human, mankind, there is a strong power on this planet Earth. But still, we have resilience and we have ecologies that have strengths against it. But there's resilience that changes its forms due to this pressure. And there is a mindset of people. We said that we've been set back, we are discouraged. If something really happened, we are set back and we have mental problems. Maybe some people are set back for a moment, but they become to be stronger after this incident. So in the research of resilience, those two areas are the starting point of resilience. So in terms of education, resilience for children, resilience for the society, and regional community. So I also help in various cities in rebuild the city. And whatever may happen, we need to stand up. And how do we need to establish resilience in region? And the main theme of today is urbanism and also disaster. So the research of resilience is quite wide in realm and have evolved around different fields and disciplines. The SDGs that you may know of, the 17 goals, there are 169 targets. And this target, when you look into each of the target covered by the 17 goals, what's highlighted in this red? The word resilience in SDGs. And we have this word. So within the target is included the word resilience in itself. So in achieving the resilience, in achieving SDGs, it is vital that we consider about the fact of resilience. And that, I think, is a common understanding already. So I am teaching system thinking at the graduate school. So resilience is part of the property of the system. And from that perspective, how resilience should be or could be described. If it's a property of a system, the various system, if it's an individual or the gathering of people or the regional community or society or ecologies or world, we can apply resilience in many forms. So what is resilience? This book that I wrote is have multiple chapters shedding light on these areas. So if there's an external pressure outside, then our current form will change. And to try to rebuild or bring back to the normal state is another power. So if there's a potential, of course, recovery, then we means we have resilience, we'll go back to the original. So against the outside pressure, there's a gap. And against this gap, the vector to rebuild back, if there's a potential resilience, it would come back. So this loop of feedback loop needs to go around effectively to have effective resilience. But the problem is, if this current situation is not good, and if it does continue, we would lose the potential power to have the resilience. They will not be able to come back. So system-wise, if we exceed a certain threshold, then the situation will always change, like coral reefs, for instance. If it's a healthy coral reef, it's okay. But if it's weak, if something happened, the so-called catastrophic regime shift, it will change so that it will not be able to brought back again. So this is the strength of the external power and the original resilience that are embedded in the system. This is a balance of these two. So the urbanism and the city and the community. If there's an external sort of power or pressure, of course, we need to assume that that is going to happen. So we need to make sure we have high level of internal resiliency in ourselves. So with that being said, in those people who are building the city, and also the artifacts, and also the natural ecology, each of them have to be resilient, and the connection of that also needs to be resilient, and that is a very vital and important aspect. So the specific in keyword, if I can list some of them, is empathy, community, and having the message to seek for help, and also artifact is adaptive management. And I'm very much looking forward to Professor Mariana's her talk, but technology, AI, IoT, and in terms of carrying capacity in nature and ecology, how you are going to put the importance of that, and being humble to nature. And you need to treasure memory and culture. So this is the story of the Great East Japan earthquake, the tsunami in the past, history. We need to have, there's a village that kept the memories of the past. And this village did not have any victims due to tsunami because the memories has been passed through to the next generation. And that is another resiliency. So again, I'm very much looking forward to Mariana, your presentation, and I hope to engage ourselves in good discussion. So thank you very much. That's all for my presentation.
Thank you indeed. Mr. De Hero, now would like to hear from Mariana, please.
Yours. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes, excellent. Sorry. Let me switch screens. Can you see my slide? Yes, all right. Thank you. First, thank you very much, Hitoshi and the DR3 team for inviting me to be part of this event. I am excited and honored to be here. And thank you very much, Edahiro-san, for sharing your presentation. I look forward to our conversation. Sorry, let me just move this for a moment, getting my screen ready. Let's put it on the side. So first, as a quick form of introduction, I wanted to give a little bit of an expanded introduction to the work that we do. I share a practice with Professor Simon Kim. And in our practice, we both teach. We have a lab where we do our research and we design through our practice. And this structure has always been instrumental in allowing us to connect ideas and research with projects. You're going to see today somehow a cross-section of projects that belong partially to lab work and partially to practice work. We work across scales and mediums, and while there are many ideas that drive the work, one of our central agendas is in the relationship between technology, culture, and environment. And we work with in collaborations with people from many different fields, and we take the knowledge and the techniques that emerges from those collaborations and we apply it to our architectural projects. So I just wanted to have this slide that offers a range of things, and while today I will focus on a few of our speculative urban projects, in a sense that is very much connected to the discoveries of projects at another scale. So when I got the invitation, I spent some time reflecting on the title and the topic of the conference, New Visions for Regenerative Urbanism, and the topic of the session with a further focus on the relationship to social resiliency. And this served as a guideline to both select the projects and sort of set the terms of engagement from my side. So I was also now, as a reaction to Professor Abe's introduction, what I'm going to show are very much imaginary cities, and they connect with the topics through the lens of technological advancement, different forms of disasters, some that are related to very much like events, like an earthquake that requires very fast reactions, and other events that take a much longer time to occur and build up. And in that temporality, there's sort of different ways in which we might construct this resiliency. So on the screen, you see the plan of one of these imaginary cities. In this case, it was generated by combining and negotiating the plans of London, Paris, and Tokyo. And the idea behind this exercise was to create a mega city that shares some features that we can find in most urban contexts, like rivers, waterfronts, qualities of a fabric that might change from formal to informal, city centers that are less dense or more dense, and other kinds of features like axiality, radial cities, and so on. And the key here is this aspect of negotiation. How do we negotiate cultural backgrounds and heritage, edges, monuments, overall urban structure? So we produce sort of this kind of image. Again, this is more like a provocation for us. And here you might see the Tokyo Tower and the Eiffel Tower and the Thames River. And it's about how we create dialogues across cultures. I'm only showing 3 images of this project, more to set a tone and a stage for the work that I will show next, which again is based on pure experimentation. So these are the projects I'm going to show. What you see on the screen is a form of an index. I'm going to show the Philadelphia Mast, the Korean War Memorial Park for Civil Victims, and the DC Loci. One of these projects takes place in the United States, in Philadelphia, the other one in South Korea, and the other one in Washington, D.C. 2 of these projects are not meant to be real, but just an observation, a critique, and a framework for operating at an urban scale by using new tools and for supporting new ideas, specifically, again, as they relate to the creation and use of public space. I just jumped into the first project. The first is called the Philadelphia Mask. It's a multi-agent project for the city of Philadelphia. And here, the focus of the research was how we cognitively map our environment via references. And those references are loaded with historical information. And that historical information usually comes in hand with the people that get to tell the story. So Philadelphia, for those of you that don't know the city, is located in the East Coast corridor of the United States. And it's a city that somehow has reacted differently to the type of economic crises that the country has gone over the past, again, 2 decades, but probably that is a much longer history. It has a striking amount of empty lots that are distributed throughout the city, regardless of real estate value. So what we did is we identified very opportunistically some empty lots, and we created this narrative of a mask of this or a theatrical reimagining of the city, where we could have architectural interventions or folies interact among themselves and with the inhabitants of the city. So essentially, it's an operation to introduce public amenity. We created this interface, and this is where we use technology and physical computing to test new ideas in urbanism. And we created this series of characters that basically could now connect the physical space of the model with the digital space of the map of the city and what we imagine to be the result of an intervention like this. So again, here we're inventing a project, but we're also inventing the tools to design the project. We created these characters that had a name, they had a formal logic, they had a medium of expression like light or sound or kinetics and behaviors. And they produce a specific cultural or, again, social amenity program depending on where they were in the city. So I'm just going to very briefly talk about one of the characters, which was supposed to be a kinetic character. This was imagined as a shelter unit for a disaster scenario. So this is like, imagine like a unit that can be flat packed and shipped to anywhere in the world. And once you get to the site where you need to deploy or support, these units basically will expand and will connect to each other, not to generate so much something like a tent or something like a building, but something like some type of urbanism that can adapt to and recombine to adapt to various terrains and contexts. So here and in the image before, you can see how these units might operate within a forest or a landscape area. And then here you see it in sort of an Italian plaza where it might take over a shared public space. And I think there is a very long history of how public spaces have been used as temporary relief sites for disasters. During COVID here in LA, Griffith Park was used to relocate a large portion of homeless population during the worst parts of the pandemic, and other examples like that. So again, the folly and the character that is technologically enabled and interacts with a type of large community on different public space scenarios. The second project I'm going to show is the Korean War Memorial for Civil Victims. In this case, the Ministry of the Interior and Safety of the Republic of Korea hosted an international design competition for a national museum in Daejeon in South Korea to commemorate the civilian victims who lost their lives during the Korean War. In this deadly war, nearly 300,000 civilians were killed. So this competition called for a project to honor the victims and serve as a place of memory. Our project focused on intervening within the geographical features of the site. We were very interested in this idea of new nature, connecting the landscape and the infrastructure to create a tight relationship between the natural and the built elements of the project. We were very much interested in building new buildings as much as we were interested in building new nature. And this is some of our agendas that deal with aspects of synthetic nature and sort of new compound beings are related to how we create these interactions between things that are there and things that will come, and trying to imagine what those interactions might be in these new scenarios. In this case, the site is a linear park that runs alongside a road and some waterways. Towards the southwest of the site is the area where the historical areas are located and very much in need of preservation. And here we're also trying to integrate all the elements of the park through this linear sequence that is very sort of continuous in a sense, but is able to create continuity while differentiating one area from the other. So to do so, the project laid out a series of what we call the outdoor rooms. They were themed outdoor rooms that were distributed to create spaces of contemplation. The first in the sequence, and the closest one to the historical site, is the room that we call the Sunken Garden, closest to the museum, which we also added programmatic components to include a community center, is the room of the floating paths. And further to the east is the Garden of Memories. So the idea with these names is also that each one of these spaces is extremely evocative, that frames and highlights the natural elements of the park, while combining them with artificial elements that have the function to, again, activate memory, provide a space of contemplation. So we were very much interested in trees. The site is highly forested. And in this case, you will see this willow tree, which actually we designed. It's a design tree that holds the names of all the victims of the war on their leaves, basically. All these components create like a synthetic nature element. Each outdoor room deliberately establishes a unique relationship to the existing ground. So we take the ground as this sort of plane of reference, and then we have a sunk garden, a ground within the ground, and a floating ground that floats above. And in that sense, your relationship with nature, in very subtle ways, it changes as you move through the paths of the park. Here you get a sense of what we're trying to accomplish with the building, very much integrating it to the sequence in the paths. So at some point you are immersed in nature, and you have these sort of framing devices that allow you to focus on the larger background of the mountains. And at some point, it allows you to focus on this frame that gives you access to the building. The project was also devised as a promenade. So the circulation of the outdoor space becomes the circulation inside the building. And again, creating all of these stages that frame nature, sometimes to celebrate the natural way in which nature gets deployed on the site, and sometimes in this very artificial way, like with this tree, where you can record and register the seasons as time goes by. So this sense of temporality is very important in our projects. And here in this image, you see some of the other views of the park. And this is the entrance to the museum and the community center. The last project I'm going to show also uses the strategy of network characters and rules. This is a project for the city of Washington, D.C., and it's another attempt at having architectural interventions produce urban transformations, and very much in this case connected to the idea of power, the spaces of power in the city. So in the case of DC and this plan that was created by L'Enfant, and that imported the Haussmann strategy that was used in Paris, the idea was to connect the main buildings of powers and monuments like obelisks and the White House and the building of Congress to these larger scale boulevards that actually worked in a strategy completely different than the fabric of the city. So the idea of the project is to operate on L'Enfant's plan, very much distorting these connections and reshaping the spaces of power. So some of the questions we were asking here was also how to connect the histories of individuals, small groups of people, and communities to the larger urban design idea. Sometimes when we're trying to design cities, I think it's very easy to get very disconnected from the stories of individuals. And we can see the city as a metric and a unit unto itself, but we can also see it as the accumulation of these individual histories. So we were trying to create a device to connect the two scales. So here you can see how we were operating from the individual to the collective and how that produced the tool for us to then, again, connect the smaller scale interventions with the larger ones. We do this type of drawings often in the office. This is a graphic representation of the type of algorithms and equations we were used very much to create and design. So what you see are basically the graphic rules. And they're based on architectural and urban operations like rotation, multiplication, scalar change, snapping of things to create relationships amongst buildings and areas in a city, folding, and so on and so forth. And then these operations are turned into sort of three-dimensional configurations that are meant to represent buildings in sort of unfamiliar situations. Suddenly you have a tilting tower or plazas that fold into themselves. So again, it's about trying to move away from the assumptions that we normally make when we design. Each agent is, in this case, like a closed environment that operates autonomously, but then when they're all operating, they produce global change, which is the basis of the method of loci, where you can basically operates like a system of memory, right? Where it can perform in fragments and at the same time reconfigure an entire system. So that reconfiguration is produced through the pressure of architectural agents. And as you begin to make them operate, the project imagines a plan like this, perhaps, where we still have the buildings of Washington, D.C., we still have spaces that represent power, but all the individual stories of the inhabitants of the city begin to have agency to create public spaces that are outside of that system and in turn produce a new form of spatial order. So again, a study of the exchange between individual action and global phenomena. And here you're going to see a simulation. I just wanted to share this video of the tool. And that drawing that I show of the graphic rules is how you see these agents that are literally operating on the DC, Washington, DC plan. And in the back, you begin to see how this fragmentation based on things like postal codes, gerrymandering, and all the lines that have been used to actually exert power might be creating these highly fragmented spaces and using that as a tool for producing positive change. That was my last slide, so I'm going to stop sharing. and I'll wait for instructions on where to go to.
Thank you. Thank you. How to say this approach of this conversation is more like a Dadaistic, so that two different things put on table and then see what happens. But there's a lot of things that interested me in your talk. So basically, the Hiro-san presented this diagram and what the resiliency is about, the connection between humankind, artificial environment, and the nature, and something, and how to actually create the bond. So maybe this artificial environment is bridging human and the nature, and then how to sort of create a strong bond really kind of creates a sense of resiliency. And also, Mariana, your presentation, I realized that there's a strong sense of the place as a, or architecture as a device to connect the place and the individual. And also somehow I was struck by the image at the Korean War Memorial with the trees and then this architecture surrounding, and it just creates a strong statement about somehow the architecture as a medium to bridge the placeness there and the human, and also the, I say, DC project, the individual are directly connected to the city and so on. So I see that the role of architecture there, and how to achieve the resiliency somehow. So maybe I'd like to start from there, so that it's like a big question. Can architecture contribute to the resiliency? Or maybe I should ask Hiro-san to start, what she expects us to do.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mariana-san, for your presentation as well. I was also impressed by Korean Memorial Wall and your project. And I was very curious about DC project, or your concept of accumulating individual and community stories and histories to that place or to the architecture. And what is your explanation behind that act? I mean, my question is how individual memories and stories can create resiliency in cities or human beings.
Yeah, I was actually really inspired by your presentation, and you shared some terms like tenacity, poverty, hunger, health, education, gender equity, and then you connected that to systems thinking. And I was thinking that the lived experience of poverty, hunger, and gender inequity is very much at a point an individual experience. We live this in our everyday life as individuals. And when we try to create systems to intervene and hopefully improve, at some point, the accumulation of these sometimes becomes, statistics or numbers. And that scale, obviously, it's extremely useful to get a sense of the scale of problems, for example. But at some point, it also has a difficulty to record or represent that individual experience. And I think particularly with the DC Loci project, we were thinking about individual agency and a tool of empowerment. We were looking at projects that use participatory design and some type of dialogue to then produce something bigger than any one individual, but still giving a tool to individuals. And I know it's imperfect in a way, but I think, Hitoshi, the way you describe this device to connect individuals to places is very much in the spirit of the projects. And maybe architecture is that intermediate scale that we inhabit that that connects them, that is relevant to both scales. So I think through empowerment and agency, maybe we can move towards the empathy and community and the adaptive management. So I don't know if it's just a problem of scale, but we're looking at it as a question perhaps of tools for design and tools of empowerment. But maybe, can I ask a question now back to Erahiro-san? You shared that story about the landslide and the aftermath of that disaster. And I was thinking about all the versions of these sort of disruptive events that happen usually without warning. And they're incredibly destructive and very visible. It's the power of its disruptiveness is evident. And everybody has to react to it. And then I was thinking about another type of disaster that is more like systemic and long building and situations that are incremental, like the coral reefs, to a point that the situation gets normalized and the element of surprise or reaction is not there. And sometimes it's harder to garner support or generate awareness or a sense of urgency to deal with them. And I think right now the world is living with these two kinds of disasters at the same time, the pandemic, the wars, and then we have the ecological, decay. And it's almost like we need a different mentality to be able to engage with the two kinds, and they're both equally urgent. And I was very curious how within your framework you might imagine operating in the one-off, visible, and the long-term brewing systemic problem.
Yeah, it is a very important point. So as you pointed out, we have, generally speaking, two kinds of crisis or disruption. One is very acute ones, suddenly happening ones. And the another one is slow moving changes. And sometimes if we don't check the progress of slow changes, the slow changes will become acute, very sharp changes. Like climate change, in the past, we have been accumulating CO2, and as you pointed out, we have been accumulating CO2, and coral reef and others are damaged. But these are not so visible changes, so we haven't done nothing about it. Now we are seeing many immediate reaction of the climate change, like the rainfall or mudslide and others. So I think these slow changes and sudden changes, they are connected in a system. But we are focusing on the sudden changes, only sudden changes. So what I like to do is try to urge people to see the whole picture so that we can have both abrupt and slow changes in our mind. It is easier said than done, but with system thinking and understanding, we will at least have some consciousness about slow changes. And that is very important because people by nature are very reactive. And so it is easier for us to react to these suddenly happening disasters, but we are very lazy to take care of slow changes. But that will be creating the huge consequences. And I also have a question to Mariana-san. I think for regenerative urbanism or the resilient cities, it is important to have resilient people, not only resilient nature, resilient artifact, but resilient people. So my question is, how architecture how can architecture foster people's resiliency?
That's a difficult question. I think there is, I'm going to use the word access. I think in our work, we've been also very interested and preoccupied with who has access to things. So we talk about a technological world and we talk about resources. We talk about it, things like education and health. But in the end, it's a problem of access because not everybody has it. And I think with architecture is a little bit similar. Like a baseline should be that everybody has access to shelter, basic shelter. And that comes hand in hand with other very complex systems like real estate speculation. And that changes so much across, cities and towns and countries that it's maybe hard to come up with prototypical ideas or universal strategies that will apply everywhere. So in LA, perhaps the word densification is continuously emerging as a strategy to produce more housing, but I don't think that would apply to Tokyo, for example. So, but the question of access, I think, again, comes associated with other systems that are related to resources and who literally benefits from those resources. So for me, the way architecture participates, in a sense, is on the same register as education and health and access to technology. And hopefully there's an inventiveness that comes to how to contribute to the question of access. So I think that's a very basic one. And the second one is maybe another area of interest is the notion of a new type of public space, the commons, as a social space owned by the people, in a sense. A space not only for demonstration, which is a very obvious form of collective expression, but again, as a space of fairness, a space that is meant to support the public. So I would say architecture, in that sense, is also in the connection with large-scale interventions. So I would say access to basic shelter and the formation of public space to support, a different kind of society, a new commons.
Okay, thank you very much. And also, I learned from your presentation that the process of architecture itself provides access to people, because you talked about dialogue and participation. And so in the process of architecture or creating new things, people can be invited to join the force. I think by having dialogue and participation of the people and the architecture process itself will provide a very good starting point for resiliency among people. So that is one of the takeaway for me. Abe-san, any questions or comments?
No, I think Hiro-san is really good to interview Mariana, and it kind of making really sense. Yes, actually, it's interesting to see the possibility of architecture as a way to educate or to increase the people's resiliency, and it's connected to the idea of creating public space, providing accessibility, and also as well as also sort of enhancing the capability of a human to influence the environment around. And especially that's where the technology can come in. And then some of Mariana's work is implying that this kind of a, the direct connection of the human capability to the environment itself, so that you have kind of an influence and a connection to the surrounding sort of environment, maybe including even nature, and how to establish such kind of a relationship to make human resilient. So, right, the environment itself can be resilient, but the most important thing is how to increase the resiliency of human being. That way we can kind of survive. We have maybe 3 minutes to conclude. So can I ask Mariana for a final statement?
No, I think I am. I very much enjoy and learning from the way that Edahiro-san and Abe-san are reading my work, and I'm trying to learn how to also use Edahiro-san knowledge to reflect on projects. I think, Hitoshi, what you just said resonates. Like, we really don't see nature and human-made things as two separate things. I mean, nature is a human construct, and we have also transformed our environment to a degree that is very much living on the effects of human action. So our work never works on the distinction, but on the relationships of them. And in that sense, hopefully we stop separating ourselves from the world of nature as whether we're superior or meant to control, but a more sort of organic and sort of a lot more synergy between what normally is understood as nature and artifice. So very much so. So the question of resiliency, I think, comes hand in hand also with taking advantage of the immense power to produce new technologies and new knowledge, because that is either going to destroy us or save us. And I want to believe that it's going to save us. So, yeah, maybe that's trying to end on a positive note on where things may go. Thank you so much for having me here. I'll pass it on to Edahiro-san maybe to wrap up.
Okay, thank you very much. I also learned a lot from Mariano-san's presentation and our discussion here. And one of the learnings is that the importance of public space. And I was not aware of the importance of public space for resiliency. And when we talk about resiliency of people, we can talk about individual resiliency and collective resiliency of the people. And I think architecture or design or public space can foster resiliency of individuals or collective, so the group resiliency. And that is one of the learning. And actually, in order to foster resiliency, there are kind of 7 disciplines. And among them, fostering learning is very important, because we have to adapt to new developments. We have to continuously learn. So learning is one of the important characteristic of creating resiliency. So for that end, I learned a lot from this discussion, and thank you very much for it.
Thank you, Edahiro-san. Thank you, Hitoshi. A pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mariana, and also Edahiro-san. No, I should call you Ibanez-san. So it's very Japanese style. But thank you again. I think there's a lot that can be continued, but I think we should move on to the second session. And before that, let's take a break. Again, please make applause to speakers for successful session. Thank you very much. Are we on still? こんにちは。New Visions for
Hello. New. This is a big table session, second session for new visions for regenerative urbanism. In the second session, we'd like to invite Matsushima-san from Wired, and designer Mr. Tachikawa is joining us today. So these, maybe I'm not necessary here to be the moderator, but I would like to have each one of the speaker give us their presentation. So can we start with Matsushima-san, please? Yes, thank you very much once again. Thank you very much for the time, 15 minutes. My name is Michiaki Matsushima. I am a head of editorial content for Wired Japan. And I have been working in the publishing industry for quite a long time. And now I am working on media called Wired. So it's a sort of a, before the internet, in 93, this is a media that has been founded then, right before the internet. Of course, when we talk about media, many of the media are digital, but we do publish paper magazines, and we have special featured stories. But at the moment, we are now publishing this Web3. So I'm sorry to boast, but this has been selling quite strongly, and it has been received quite effectively. And in terms of regenerative urbanism, the regenerative, the word in itself, Professor Abe also mentioned and defined about the regenerative. But last year, we have a special feature of food regenerative. So for the planet, gastronomy for the world of the planet is the subtitle. In other words, the sustainable, let's say, in sustaining the status quo rather than building back. It's more of a evolutionary rebuilding, or it's really is the food of how we be able to evolve for the future in terms of the cooperative sort of a farming. And although we harvest, it's a food by which we will be able to contribute back to the planet and Earth. So last year, regenerative was a big theme for us, our magazine. And we had Future Regenerative, which was a conference that we offered in the fall of last year. So we had this conference, or what do we mean by regenerative? And in terms of urbanism, after the pandemic. So what about the neighborhood? We need to also shed light on the change and evolution of the neighborhood. We have started that effort last year. And this time, the regenerative urbanism, what do we mean by that? When we think about that, one of the things that we have thought is that, well, about 2, maybe 3 years ago even, we have a special feature called Mirrored World at Wired. So the physical city, as an information layer, we're going to superimpose to the physical city. So we talked about the digital twin, and the city, in terms of information and the physics, is going to superimpose one another. So this is a word that I came up with. And in this version, like the architect, Keisuke Toyoda, physically, it is not a city that is a tangible city. That's a dead city. By applying, information layer on the architecture will become alive. So the regenerative, when you think about that word, this is the direction that we can discern our future. So mirror world, it's like a metaverse. The metaverse is now a buzzword right now. So in a way, in terms of augmented reality and the reality being superimposed to one another. And that is the world that we foresee. But when we try to talk about that, it's more skewed toward augmented reality. So therefore, today, I would like to switch back my gear towards the regenerative urbanism. So when we talk about technology, how technologies are embraced in this concept is something that I wanted to consider. So this is really a new dimension in a way. But Professor Abe has talked about nature and human. Nature and human needs to live in close symbiosis, and that is the basis. But within that, city intervening in between. So Ms. Edahiro talk about the definition. There are artifacts in between as well, not only humans. So human to nature It's really a naked nature, naked human. It's not 101. But we start with close. So technology always an intermediary or boundary to that. So the technology then is in the organic regenerative, it's just a means or a method, or that in itself is regenerative. It is going to regenerate over and over again as a technology. And maybe city in itself, or the regenerative urbanism is what we are trying to consider as technology regenerating itself. So this is in 93 when we founded this. We have a manifest at Wired at that time. The social changes that is happening in terms of digital innovation that was talked about then. It's really is like a human finding fire. So fire is what is a technology that human has discovered. So we can now cook food, we can eat warm sort of food, and that led to Homo sapiens in terms of human brain growing because we can eat hot food. And then there are cities and villages and also urban development, and that is analogy. So in Wired, the executive editor, Kevin Kelly, who is a founder of the editor, this is the Tech New. It's a book called Tech New. I like to go back. So where technology is heading towards is a subtitle. So it's originally what technology wants is the subtitle in the actual written original English version of the book. But that Tech New is Kevin Kelly is advocating Tech New. So what's Tech New? This is really it's organism of idea. So idea that's generated by humans and something new, connecting one information to the other information is techno. And life is self-generating. It's an information system that self-generates itself. So self-generating and regenerating, when you multiply those together, then life or organism, the information of what's living is an information itself, and technology is a connection with the human idea, and it's going to be regenerating, self-generating as a life. So this is a big sort of a idea of techno. And again, this is just an image from the internet. So let's say North America, there's so much type of birds, and let's say in Apple computer, it was developed by humans. So there's so much variety. And this is really an analogy of technology and life. And in other words, the tree of life, the humans, at the tip of the branch is one of the tip of the branch. And this is, for instance, trumpet and how it evolved. This is the evolutionary tree of trumpet. It's like a tree of life. It branches out and bifurcate. So material or the usage and convenience and the fad of the quality of the sound and music. So these external, of course, relationship, technologies and tools have evolved and have branched out and has diversified. And Kevin Kelly, in terms of technology, is human and life. It's not separated. It's like it's the seventh tier of life. So that's how we embrace techno. So it says seven kingdom here, but the city itself, city I think is the foundation of technology. So not what's outside, but nature and natural environment or what humans perceive. It's connected analogically. So therefore, as I've said, techno, what technology wants is the original course title of the book. And Tachikawa-san is going to further deepen, I think, this concept. But the evolution, when we talk about evolution, is it random evolution or is there a direction, sequences? We have been talking about the notion of evolution. So then technology, if it's life and it has evolved, for us it's evident that technology have evolved like humans. So is there any wants or will to this evolution is something that we would like to shed light on. And in techno, this has been introduced. In terms of life, eyes have evolved in humans. But those are different sort of a line for 40, 60 times they have evolved over the years. That's what Richard Hockey has said. So eyes for instance, like a fish, there are eyes on the fish. And are we succeeding? No, it has bifurcated and branched out for the eyes to evolve. So the evolutions of the eyes and stages of the eye, it was inevitable in the world of evolution. It is a convergent evolution. So it's a very different, of course, evolution that has evolved in different means. And in terms of technology and tools and humans, quite famous, each one of them is is the invention of a human. Galileo have found this solar system. The first, of course, finding on the space. But that's not something that was invented by one genius, but there are multiple people at the same time have found a similar discovery, and that is evident in history. So that is the technological evolution in terms of the solar dark spot. About 4 or 5 people have found this. So temperature thermometer. So how many people have found that same discovery is evident in this number like 4 and 6. Like 5 people developed photography. And the next is a telegraph. And in fact, Thomas Edison finding a candescent light bulb, about 35 people have said that it was their discovery. In other words, what it means by that is that it's like the evolution of the eyes, like Edison. Finding a candescent light bulb, but in fact, 23 people have already found and have declared that there is their own discovery. And from a macroscopic point of view, that's a convergent evolution. So without Edison, the candescent light bulb was involved anyway. Without Steve Jobs, maybe we don't know the product is called iPhone, but the smartphone-like technology inevitably were in the hands of humans. So these technological evolution, when you think about that, in terms of singularity is what we talk about in the AI. It's like dystopia. That's been all talked about. But the life, with the life being born and have discovering fire, and then Homo sapiens and art, and then starting agriculture and farming. So how was it inevitable? How was it unavoidable? Well, that's the world of technu. And that is the biggest question that we need to impose ourselves. So within that, this is a 3-tiered structure of evolution. So in life, in terms of structural or adaptability, what adapted would always survive. But in the evolution of the eyes, there are certain structure or inevitable structure, and then technu, the technology for the technology. Well, of course, there are historical coincidences. Like with the pandemic, people are now starting to get used to Zoom. And there is a sort of incidental, and there's intentional as well. So human will is also resides within technu. So people and city and technology, we work in various ways utilizing technology, but it's a structural inevitability that is emerging. And because of that very reason, technology is in a similar time. Many people have find new discoveries in a similar point in time. So that is what is happening. So these technu way of thinking, once again, the theme today, regenerative urbanism. So city and urbanism, it's a technium of its own. So how are we going to evolve this urban city? It's going to be a big question for us all. So I have no answer to this question at the moment. But in Wired, deep tech for Earth is what we are considering. And this is a special featured version of that. And we talk about Anthropocene. It's an Anthropocene that it's a people-centric world. And beyond that, how we be able to transcend this Anthropocene. And then Anthropocene and beyond, in a way, is intentional and at the same time structural. And this is in the regenerative city and urban. It is going to form, create, and it's going to be the path for the future evolvement of the regenerative urbanism. And this is my conclusion. So Of course, I have asked a question to various people. So people have to live with an ambiguity. So like the resilience that Hiro said, it's an evolution by ways of in the midst of ambiguity. And Benjamin Brad also talked about the similar notion, the human and animals and machines is not separated, but it's intertwined into each other. And that is what's been advocated by him. And Jigin Liu, it's a science fiction novel that he's quite famous of. And he talked about next to human, there is an AI, a sort of a super brain that's going to saturate the world as a conceptual ways. And also Dominic Chen has said that in the interaction, technology would evolve. And if that's the case, and precondition, we, for the next generation, would not have a decision vote of what our future will be, but rather it's a regenerative white space or room that we need to secure for the future generation. So these perspectives is going to be quite significant. So to conclude, so not just AI or high technology, the city will evolve. It's not that type of a scenario. The cellular Rojak, which I really like, it's in the world of counterculture. Well, with the evolution of high technology, in fact, we are like picking berries in the forest. So that is a direction for technium as the technology evolves. So I'm sorry, this is just throwing everything out on the table, but this will be my presentation. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you indeed. Then, without further ado, I would like to move on to the presentation by Tachikawa-san, please. Yes, thank you. Hello, this is Tachikawa. Actually, I run a design company, and also Jira. Actually, again, I represent the Jira. Actually, having the longer history in Japan. 11 years ago, together with Abe-san, actually, we started working on this the exhibition introduced in Los Angeles right after the March 11, 1911. Again, I'm so impressed with your continuing efforts. Again, since then, I'm so happy as for this. Again, the presenter, Matsumoto-san, actually, well, Wired. Actually, I believe that the contents of Wired actually turned out to be a lot more interesting and intriguing after you became the editor-in-chief. So with that observation, I'm so happy given this opportunity. I'm here together with Mr. Matsushima. If I may, I'd like to share 2 points from my side. Point 1 is, well, personally, actually, designer is the designer office I work. Actually, I would like to make my contributions, which is going to actually help human beings and people, and disasters, and also the regenerative urbanism. I think some of the activities and we are working on. So maybe we could share some of my personal case studies. But prior to that point, as Matsumoto-san actually was sharing this point earlier. Actually, evolution of living organisms and technologies. Actually, we have to look at the relationship. Actually, this consists of about 500 pages. Actually, evolution in the thinking. Actually, Kelly-san, of course. So actually, I was really impressed by it, and also influenced by Kelly's technium. So I'm so happy given this opportunity. And with this point in mind, how we can actually generate quite creative projects. But prior to that, I think there is one concept I'd like to introduce to you. This is something new. Allow me to expand on this. And in thinking about the regenerative the urbanism, I think this the evolution thinking could be some of the one of the important ideas. Maybe I could share with you. This is my day one in introducing this idea. So the first, I'd like to look into this the concept of the evolution. I should be able to share the audio sound. Evolution. Again, Matsumoto-san actually talked about the evolution earlier, and Well, of course, including the advancement technologies, and when we are to create something, this is going to be quite the strange phenomenon. We do believe that it's only the human beings who are actually doing that. No other animals are engaged in creating something concrete. But again, how we can actually come up with and generate the creative projects, how we can actually help cities to further advance out of this, the ideas. So creativity and evolution is what I like to look at. Again, the advancement and evolution of the living organism and the technologies. Again, in principle, again, I think we are having exactly the same structure in terms of imagining something. If that's the case, out of this in the process, maybe it's time for us to learn about the creativity. And this is the basic the idea behind this evolution thinking. Shinkashikon in Japanese. Actually, the mutation and also the adaptability is going to the process. Actually, the mutation, of course, comes in out of the below. And this the incidental actually phenomena is based upon the linguistic pattern because this is quite coming from the DNA the situations. I should not go into too details, but again, if you try to analyze the pattern, be it technologies and ideas and designs, actually, we are actually looking into these 9 kinds of ideas. Again, in coming up with ideas, actually, we'll find ourselves exposed to these the 9 patterns, and this is going to be repeatable. So actually, living organisms seem to be advancing without having the process, the thinking process. I think we should be able to find the coincidence between the humans and also the animals. Again, this is a collection of 9 points. Again, this is one half of the evolution of thinking. But of course, if we have nothing but errors, there will be no good creativity. Again, lots of ideas in the architecture in random fashion. Well, out of that, we may be lucky enough to come up with something good. But again, we have to be able to make a judgment, and yes, this is good. This is something good, positive. Again, adaptability of the living organism is what I like to talk about. Actually, human beings actually has the long history of the tens of hundreds of the years. Why each living organism isn't having the current form? Actually, there seems to be only one the types here. Only 4. Again, what we can observe here is going to be only limited to the space and time. Space and time. Something inside and something outside, and something past and something about the future. This is the only thing we can deal with. If that's the case, well, the ideas, well, the advancing, the creativity, I think we have to make a really good observations of the adaptability, and by doing so, we should be able to actually advance our creativity. That's what I believe. Maybe this can, we believe that this should be treated as a new the academic field for learning. Mujirishi Ryohin, for example, Benesen, actually the largest education company in Japan. Actually, I am serving as the lead of this the panel sessions looking into the future courses for us to follow. And I do hope that we can make contributions in this regard as time goes on. Well, advancement, evolution of the living organism, and also the technium, and also the urbanism, the technique. I believe that we should be able to find certain similarities among these the areas. I think that is going to be related to this the theme regenerative the urbanism. I hope I'm not wrong. Well, I have come up with my personal ideas, and I would say they are somewhat interesting. But before I go into too details, I'm sorry, I'm not well organized in making my presentation. But again, what is this regenerative urbanism, particularly the vis-a-vis disasters? I have been involved in this process to some extent. Again, March 11, 1911, the Great East Japan and earthquake. Of course, I had a chance working with Professor Nabe in Los Angeles. Actually, we have actually, we were able to share the lots of wisdom information among all the people. And I believe that some of this effort and actually has helped to help the people who suffered from the March 11. Again, we have 8 million people in Tokyo, actually the largest city in the world. And again, we need to be able to have really good ideas which will help us vis-a-vis the possible disasters. And this is coming from the Professor Natsuda, and actually based upon the disasters, natural disasters in Tohoku region. This is the COVID-19 things, and even in this pandemic, well, I think we had a collection of about 300 volunteers, and actually we were able to actually share the information, and actually by cutting the 3 places in the clear sheet, and that is going to actually create a face shield. This is going to be this is 20 meters and quite long. The musical score again. We are looking into all these ideas from the resiliency and get resilience in vis-a-vis cities. Again, maybe if we can have such that again, we should be a part of this. So the living organism, well, the number of disasters and actually rising quite dramatically. Again, on the flies and then also the other the natural disasters. Actually, all these traditional ideas are not good enough. Actually, it is wrong for us to try to protect the people just by depending upon the retain the walls or those walls, and actually the vis-a-vis the water, the ocean floods. So we need to come up with something new. Again, of course, we have that long tradition. Again, in this the urban the planning, I think we have to look into the crustaceans, the crabs. Our current structure are akin to those of the crustaceans, and we protect ourselves with an outer shell. I think this is what we have to actually pay more attention to. Of course, in the retaining wall, if it is really strong enough, it will be okay. But what's going to happen if it's broken? What's nothing we can do to repair it up. Just like this outer shell of the crabs. Again, we are here to look into the regenerative cities. Well, we have to consider ourselves as the mammals or the other types of animals. For example, this is the structure of the civilization of skin. If you cut your muscle, again, outer side we have nerve, here we have head, we have muscle, and here we have bone. That's what you see here. In other words, again, on the nerve is going to be can have access to feedback, and the fat actually is going to have redundancy, acting as buffer, and the flexibility comes from the muscle, and robustness actually is a strength itself. I think this is a collection of resiliency. In other words, okay, feedback, of course, is going to be the alarm and redundancy. Again, the buffer has been secured in the retaining wall. Regenerative urbanism, I think, is looking into this kind of an idea. Well, the flexibility. Actually, the Earth, the quake-proof structure, so that is going to give us flexibility. And robustness itself is a strength. That's from that kind of perspective, the structure of resilience can be easily explained. As Hidehiro-san explained this point earlier, again, what are important the perspectives we need to have? We need to structurize all these ideas. Then I think we will sooner or later come up with this kind of structure. Resiliency skin is the name I gave here. And this is the graphical form. Actually, the nerves and the fat and the muscle and the bone, and in the bottom, actually, a spare arm. The bone is broken, even if you have lost your left arm. Again, you still have the right arm. Damage. When the damage is small, you can come back. You can make a quick recovery. So you can expect to have a quick recovery. But what's going to happen? Well, going beyond in the fat, moving into the muscle. Again, if you have that deep cut, well, it is going to take several hours, but still you can make a good recovery. if the damage hit the bone, it is going to be rather difficult. Maybe you need to have 1 month before you can have a full recovery, and going beyond a certain timing, then coming back, recovery is going to be somewhat difficult. And going beyond that point, no way that we can expect to have recovery. So the city planning, in terms of hardware, we need to look into this nerve layer, and fat layer, and a muscle layer. In these layers, we need to create buffers. To what extent, how many buffers we can make? And of course, disaster alarm system is going to be quite important, but also how the retaining wall is going to be quite important. And also, we need to have certain flexibility in these areas. Self-recovery, ecosystem recovery, that's what you see here. What do I mean by this? Well, actually, the resiliency and recovery and capability is going to be different depending upon the area and the city. For example, Tokyo, the disaster prevention, of course, it's very important for each one of the local residents to have really good awareness vis-a-vis the disasters. Then that is going to help us to have a much quicker recovery. So we have to pay attention to the left-hand side and right-hand side. And ecosystem recovery, again, this is kind of support. Again, resilient system is in here. In other words, actually, supplies are provided from the areas. So this is another important aspect we have to look at. Again, hardware side and the left-hand side. Here, it is going to be, again, the resilient city to be created versus. At the same time, we have to look into the right-hand side, how we can actually advance move the regency up at a higher level. We need to have that at system level. If this is the right categorization, then of course, again, we have to address the climate change. Again, what is going to be the best timing in this regard? Maybe for that kind of, in order to address that kind of question, this kind of metaphor may be useful. That's what I believe. I just wanted to share that idea. And here, this is the section on the substitution. Well, all in all, well, the time given to me is 15 minutes, I think, and I have run up the time given to me. But again, the metaphor in terms of the living organism should be the area we have to pay more attention to in order to be successful in the regenerative urbanism. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, two gentlemen have given us a very exciting broadening our scope and field for us all. But as I've said, I thought I could play hooky here because the two of you will have a very intensive dialogue. And both of you respect each other. And that was evident in the presentation as well. At the outset, to Matsushima-san, I will ask Tachikawa-san, what do you think of Matsushima-san? So I'm sorry, a very rough question. Well, thank you very much, Tachikawa-san. Your evolutionary thinking. In a minimum amount of time, I was really able to learn about the gist of and the important core part of the evolutionary thinking. And the skin metaphor that you shared with us, it is true. Well, cities and urban, which is the theme, the regenerative, life and organic, to redefine city as the organic and well, it's really clear in terms of everyone that really knows about our sort of a body, from the superficial skin to the actual how our bodies are being made to the bone. And this is a great framework to the metaphor of the human skins. That's my first, of course, impression. And design is really cool. Yes, thank you. So I know that you're a great sort of designer, so I feel presumptuous. So Kevin Kelly, I love, and Matsushima-san, I also am a great avid fan of yours. So I'm really, really happy to be here. And I really have enjoyed the presentation, Matsushima-san. So I think that's a commonality in Matsushima-san. So you have been the chief editor And the first version of in terms of co-symbiosis with the ecology, it was, I think, the first version that you have featured when you inaugurated this position. So civilization is not only for the sake of humans, but regenerative. It really is a law of nature. How will you be able to work on that? It's about the food and in various aspects. It's a main theme. So then, city is developing for the sake of humans. So within that, well, evidently, the ecological, it is the ecology. The city itself is an ecology, and the relationship with ecology is evident in terms of city. But in terms of the walled sort of a city, the system connection, you may not be able to be mindful of the systematic connection. But that leads us to our society not being resilient. So that, I think, is a danger or pitfall for us. But Matsushima-san, in that sense, every version, that of course dimension is always in that theme, no matter what angle you put your feature story. So I would like to know what's in your mind when you feature this story. Well, thank you very much for the question. Because as Tachikawa-san mentioned, exactly, it connects back to what you just have kindly said. Because the common situation is technology and human. It's in term binary, and life and artifacts. It's binary, but we need to break that. We need to break that wall. So in terms of that context, how you will be able to insert that, I think, is the role of magazine Wired. And yesterday, I believe, in Wired, we have a new article. IPCC have announced the new statement of the climate change, the human thinking about the climate urgencies. Technology, we have all the set of technology with us, but with the government and states, the will of humans to correctly utilize the technology have not yet caught up. So that is the content of my article. And the deep depth for the earth. And Tachikawa-san, you mentioned digital well-being. These are featured publication. In that way, it's nature, environment, and regenerative urban city. The strong disaster and symbiosis with nature. It seems that the technology is like the shell you talked about. It's outside, and human life, or it's outside of environment and everything, what have you. So by installing this, you can create another sort of a shell, and that's a kind of way of thinking. But that again, the humans to start off with, the fact that we have grown over the years, is the relationship of life. So it's an organic, I think, growth together. And that, I think, is a very important perspective. So otherwise, we won't be able to come up with a regenerative city or regenerative urbanism. Again, creating a wall, and that's it. We don't want to go through the same story over and over again, and that's my sense of urgency. So looking at the theory from nature perspective, well, high technology have disrupted this nature. So we need to return to nature. It's kind of easy sort of a theory in a way, but there's a limit to that. So there needs to be another context that needs to be embedded. So that really is kind of the backbone of how I'm thinking. I really resonate with you, yes. Well, if I may, listening to two of you talking, time is limited. So of course, one thing that I would like to really deep dive is that's common for both of you. In Matsushima-san, your presentation, this is human-centric. What goes beyond the human centricity? The humans is a center in terms of the environment. We look at it from the human-centric perspective. And if there is a deviation from the human-centric perspective, it's quite interesting. So the meaning of technology and the physics and the mechanism of nature, when we shift that perspective, I think a lot of things will change. So first of all, Tachikawa-san, I would like to hear from you, because it's kind of interrelated. Yes, thank you very much. I completely agree, because at the moment, making the society resilient is not only what humans have created, it's really the ecology. The ecology has contributed to this resiliency that we humans are benefiting from. So in other words, the bumblebees, one type of bumblebees in human in per annum, it's 20 trillion yen of the benefit that bumblebees contribute to the human society. So bumblebee, a lot of bumblebees. Of course, we need a big field for the bumblebee to grow. And our maintenance, the number of deer, the number of wolves that have a cyclic sort of connection to having a nature. So, in other words, this wolf and deers are contributing to the field, and the field is contributing to bees, and bees are contributing to humans. So, these connections, I think humans are not good at that, I believe. So, when you talk about technology, it's like anatomy and also in terms of nature, that's the outside and inside. And it's really the anatomy. So the creating a car company, we need to have anatomize or deassemble a car that you want to make in that new company. That's what we've done in the 20th century. But cars, in creating cars, what does in the system has a significance and meaning is not clear at this point in time.
So now I hope you're with me. And actually, if you believe that you're going to be successful, and if you have sold lots of cars, many cars, I think you're wrong. Earlier, I talked about bumblebee thing stories, and also that is bumblebees and actually are benefiting us. Well, big question here, but I think we need to have some of the new the perspectives of Native Indians, for example. And since back then, olden days, and also actually, animation. Actually, Japan is well known for animation. Actually, what kind of sympathy, collaboration we can create between these two things? I think we have to go back to the scale one in this regard. And that said, how we can do it, as Machima-san mentioned this, I think we need to be able to come up with the senses. For example, satellites, and actually, where lots of CO2 have been generated, we should be able to tell, and specifically, yes, it is from this the country, community, and actually, CO2 being generated utilizing the satellite technologies. I'm talking about the feedback, and again. Well, that is really wrong. And actually, for example, we are observing the ozone layer sphere. And actually, yes, we succeeded. This is one of the few success stories, and actually in addressing this ozone layer issues. Again, behind it, we have technologies. I think we should be able to learn something from these stories. Again, Machima-san actually is sharing, these ideas and through your activities. Thank you for that point. Well, if I may say, again, visualization, I think, is going to be important. And also, you are right, Tachikawa-san, technologies. I think we need to look into the interaction between humans and also technology. Again, we need to actually be able to make a really good selection of technologies within the environment we live in. I think this is quite important for the cities, for urbanism. Well, humans at center, for example, of course, diversity of the cities actually are going up. And actually, we happen to have many species which are going about to actually distinct. And so even if I wish to actually study the evolution theory of the major cities, and actually I wanted to get some money for that research, but actually that idea was turned down. Because the many people do believe that, again, whatever we do, at the center, in the core, we have the humans. I think that is something that is a wrong attitude. I think we have to change ourselves. Otherwise, I don't believe that we can expect to have better situations. I think we need to actually look into all this, the lots of feedback loops. I think we have to start from that observation. Yes, we are having the lots of the feedback loops. We should get away from the human-centric mindset. versus E.O. Wilson, actually, half Earth. Again, just lived by the humans, and also another half actually lived by the non-humans. I like his story very much. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Well, ultimately, love Jeff Bezos, and actually maybe we should take all the humans and all the way to Mars, and we should evacuate from the planet Earth. All you're talking about cars, because human actually selected this technology, and actually the cars actually are killing the many people year in year after. Sorry saying about this. Actually, we have selected the cars and the vehicles for more than 100 years, but now using the AI, artificial intelligence, and actually we are having the automated running the cars. Actually, it took us 100 years before we have reached this point. Again, how many lives we have lost out of this car technologies? Now we are now utilizing the AI again, helping cars to automate to run in automated fashion. So I think this is something we can apply to the urbanism, what we call the regenerative and urbanism. Also, this can be applicable to the disasters and how best we can actually protect us humans. It's wrong for us to think all the time that in the center we have humans. Rather, humans are having interaction with the non-humans. I think that's what we have to tell ourselves. We have to actually have really good awareness in this regard, or human-centric things. Again, it's time for us to get away from this human-centric ideas, and also said Rosalind actually going back into the world. I think that is another important story we have to keep an eye on. And on the migrating people, all the way to Mars, I think there could be certain similarities in this regard. All in all, the forests and the woods consists of lots of the unknown species. We do not have a good knowledge who is living in there. Maybe maybe that's why we should encourage ourselves to move into the world so that we can make new discoveries, new observations. How you call it? An AI. By having AI, now AI can actually take up lots of activities which were done by the humans. James Whitlock, and actually, he actually is talking about his theory on the Gaia theories. Well, the humans have intelligence, but again, this intelligence is not the ultimate point. We still have a long way to go. So maybe we need to have such a deviation. Again, it's not the humans who are in the central point. I think I am really learning a lot from this point. I think be it cities or be it well, actually, the knowledge, wisdom, and also the significance of technologies. I think, well, I'm not here to make a wrap-up in conclusion, but again, this is something I was able to learn. Lastly, I'd like to ask each one of you to share, to make your final comments. Maybe I should ask that question to share your last comments, please.
Well, listening to your conversation, there's things that crosses my mind. So this will be my last word. So we need to break through from a crab, and what I mean by that is that it's a hypothesis, and technology is functioning as a shell. And if you establish a shell, it's very difficult to update this hypothesis, and that's happening in various ways and means. And if that shell is not outside, but it's a regenerative sort of a cells, and if there's a boundary such as shell, then even the environment changes. You can transform yourself flexibly. It's a clue to transform yourself effectively. So that, of course, could be not only physical, but as a concept, and ideology, that kind of updating function. It could be a regulatory framework, and we don't have or lack that way of thinking. So for decades, we have a non-sustainable sort of a way that we lived. So although we are involved, but the society does not change, and it's the non-regenerative societies is likely could have been created by humans. So this ambiguous zone, the structures, once again, have to be revisited. So can we able to sense that, or changing a bit and then coming back? That sort of a buffer zone. You are tolerant of these changes. Like Uber has came out of this buffer zones in a way. So this is at the outside sort of a robust sort of a shell or crustacean, and thinking about the civilization is really is a boundary or the touch point or interface with the nature. Well, Tachikawa-san, I want to hear you for an hour. I could and I want, but I hope that there would be another opportunity for me to do so. But the skin structure, again, is the first time for me to expose myself. And I have trailing, and I run, and I ran with a sandal, and I'm a primitive sort of a believer. I don't wear shoes. And the shoes, when you're running, it tears, and the soles comes off, and it wears. But if you are barefoot, you may bleed, but if you leave it alone, your skin grows again. I always say that. So, in other words, the best thing is barefoot, not shoes, really, okay. So, having said that, is it a physical thing, or is it something else? Well, in my way of thinking, it could be information. Maybe that's a difference. So life or evolution is not material, but it's going to be more information oriented. So city, again, is not just a physical sort of a physics. So then if you apply physical stress, it's going to break. But how flexible can you convert that to be, I think is a big theme for us. So with that being said, the current generation, by 2050, first of all, our goal is decarbonization and be fully equipped with renewable energy and utilizing a lot of information and also utilizing information. Well, civilization-wise, we are in a preparatory stage. So in terms of the circular, of course, setting of electricity and carbon, we are resetting the stage for that in the span of centennial, that is. So that is I think, the destiny when you're born in history. So again, what we need to do is in the terms of the physical things, it's going to break anyway, so we need to be replaced by information, and that is really the meaning of regenerative. So that's what I was thinking. Thank you very much. It is true. Information could be updated, so it's very flexible in structure in nature. Yes, the redundancy, again, in the world of internet, a global network really is geared towards that end. And maybe in hindsight, it's just a beginning of a beginning in terms of where we live now. So now I think we need to move into the next phase. So that's my thinking. Well, I would like to continue this dialogue, but unfortunately, we need to conclude. And Matsushima-san, Tachikawa-san, thank you very much for the session. Probably it could be that we are now in a major transition of the era and time, and there's a lot of possibility. And it's a time where we have to confront a lot of issues as well at the same time, because we're the age of transition. We hope that we'll be able to engage ourselves in this type of a discussion in the future as well. So for the next generation, the next era, we wanted to be fully prepared, and we want to contribute ourselves for the preparation of the next stage. So thank you very much once again. So thank you very much. So now I think it's going to be moving to the conclusion. So please, we'd like to come back to the main channel. So thank you very much. Thank you.
皆さんこんにちは。三井不動産の北原と申します。本日のアーク DR3 並びにリジェネラティブアーバニズム展、これらにご尽力されました安倍先生をはじめ今村先生、そして環太平洋11の大学の皆様方、また、本日のシンポジウムにご参加いただいた各界の先生方、大変素晴らしいご議論と展示をいただき、誠にありがとうございます。
Well, thank you indeed for your time despite your busy schedule, and we are here now to share our heartfelt appreciation going to each one of you. 11 years ago, of course, we had March 11, 2011, actually, and we had a big earthquake in the Tohoku region of Japan. Of course, we have many lost lives, and actually, the scale was as many as 20,000. Many people have lost their lives, and also in Tokyo, actually, we had a magnitude of 5, a little less than 6, resulted into lots of conditions and policies of traffic and operations and in the metropolitan area. Yes, we still have a vivid memory in these regards. Well, of course, and I do represent Mitsubishi Fudosan. Of course, the Nihon Bashin is one of the important communities. Actually, we are trying to actually make our contributions to make local cities strong enough. And actually, Nihon Bashin Smart City actual project started from that an idea. Actually, TEPCO actually has its initiatives, but besides that, actually, besides the power and the system by the TEPCO, actually, we are now working on this project, actually working on the improved gas systems. Again, through the system, we would like to actually supply the power in case the major the grids actually went down. We should be able to actually provide the same level of power actually under those circumstances. And in the normal days, of course, we can expect to actually reduce the energy consumption, which will result in the less the production of the CO2. So, actually, we're quite happy to be engaged in this quite aggressive project. Again, we have the concept and development activities within Mitsui Fudosan group companies. Actually, we have these traditional ideas and concepts. Also, we would like to actually leverage in the new, because we would like to preserve the the good old tradition. At the same time, well, we experienced World War II, and also how we have lots of important lives out of the March 11 disaster. Again, out of this the crisis disasters, we should be able to learn something new. So something old, something new need to be well connected so that we can make better contributions going forward. We're so happy given this opportunity, and we're so happy Mitsui Fudosan was able to actually support and as a special sponsor to behind this the symposium. That said, and again, I am truly grateful for your excellent the contributions and through the presentations and the discussions. Again, we are here to learn a lot of things from your insights. Again, these insights we are gaining here is going to help us to make our contributions to the regenerative urbanism. Yes, I am learning a lot, particularly for the urban development and activities within Mitsui Fudosan. Definitely, it's going to be benefited out of these programs. Thank you indeed. I commit myself to this important journey. Of course, we are having the different time differences again among all these people along the Pan-Pacific regions. But again, we are able to actually overcome such time differences thanks to the modern technologies, thanks to the modern IT technologies. But hopefully, next time, again, in the same place, again, I do hope that we can have same programs face to face in person next time. So I wish, thank you again for your kind participation and attention. Thank you.